Would you like to start?
Yes, yes. Let's start. Violeta, is okay with you?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm happy to start.
It's 5:08. Then
yes, it is.
all right. Sudabe, we're gonna start with your prayer, and we're gonna
maybe someone else would like to say a prayer after.
No, we don't. We say one prayer, and then we're gonna come to the prayer. This is not. This is a promenade. This is
not a democracy.
This is not a devotional meeting. This is one prayer and counting the verses.
Okay.
We have to meditate on that prayer. When you're done, we have a quiz on that prayer, please. Thank you. Sharpen your pencils. Sudabe, be my guest.
All praise, O my God, be to thee, who art the source of all glory and majesty, of greatness and honor, of sovereignty and dominion, of loftiness and grace, of awe and power. Whomsoever thou willest, thou causest to draw nigh unto the most great ocean. And on whomsoever thou desirest, thou conferrest the honor of recognizing thy most ancient name. Of all who are in heaven and on earth, none can withstand the operation of thy sovereign will. From all eternity, thou didst rule the entire creation, and thou wilt continue forevermore to exercise thy dominion over all created things. There is none other God but thee, the Almighty, the most exalted, the all-powerful, the all-wise. Illumine, O Lord, the faces of thy servants, that they may behold thee, and cleanse their hearts, that they may turn unto the court of thy heavenly favors, and recognize him who's the manifestation of thyself, and the dayspring of thine essence. Verily, thou art the Lord of all worlds. There is no God but thee, the unconstrained, the all-subduing. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you very much, Sudabe. Violeta, can you just, excuse me, this is just between me and Violeta. Can you tell Susie that I'm up here so she knows that I changed locations? Excuse me, because my wife is used to do the Zoom downstairs in the living room, but because they have family, I decided to come up the floor to my office and we set it up here. So, with your permission, I'm going to ramble on different things. The idea is some of the things that I might share throughout will just spark something, an idea that any of us can just carry and do something with it, you know, especially teaching and doing amazing things. So I'm just, whatever I say may make sense to some, may not make sense, I don't know, but I do tend to prepare a little bit and improvise at the same time. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about prayer, verses for God. We are going to talk about vignettes, a vignette that has humor in it from Baha'u'llah in Adrianople, and the little vignette on Abdul Baha in Akka, where is that some humor in it. We're going to talk about service that was rendered by Abdul Baha, and what kind of service was that. And we're going to talk about service that was rendered by the early Baha'is in the British Isles. Those amazing ladies that kicked off the whole teaching process in England. Amazing ladies. I'm not going to give a historical, detailed background or anything. I'm just going to point out to very specific things that are of interest to all of us. And then I'm going to talk about at what point do we decide to open our mouths to mention the faith to somebody, because it takes some courage to open your mouth, because sometimes you're afraid that they may reject what you're saying, so you tend to hesitate and you say, my gosh, should I speak or not speak? And that's a dilemma. Now, before I enter into all these little things, remember I told you that we're supposed to be, each one create a bouquet. Bouquets is the kinds of actions that we do in terms of teaching or seed planting or proclamations that we can say in our lifetimes that we have built the bouquet that we're offering to Baha'u'llah. And each one does his own bouquet. You know, no bouquet is going to be the same as the other one. So each one can go back and can remember who he taught and who he spoke to. Sometimes you see the fruits of your actions, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you talk to people that you never ever see again that may have become amazing Baha'is at the other end of the world, you know. So only God can judge. So we are still dealing with this theme of bouquets, and I'm adding a theme of promenade. Promenade is we're going to be walking down different historical paths, very short, and some of the things that are going to tickle our minds. And I will explain those people that I'm going to be mentioning. Now, I'm going to start with the prayer we just read. There's one section in the prayer. I don't know if you have the prayer in front of you. I don't have the English, I have the French. Violetta will read the English. It's the one that says, tu diriges qui tu veux vers ton très grand océan, et à qui bon te semble, tu confères l'honneur de reconnaître ton très ancien nom. Violetta will read it. Do you see it there? Violetta?
Everyone should see it there.
Okay,
So, where is it? Thou, whomsoever thou willest, thou causest to draw nigh unto the most great ocean.
Where is it?
It's the third line, the second word of the third line.
Okay, so here. Okay, so we just stick with that sentence. Whomsoever thou willest, thou causest to draw nigh unto the most great ocean, and on whomsoever thou desirest, thou conferrest the honor of recognizing the most ancient name. So my own take on this sums up the whole process of teaching. Basically, it is when you talk about receptive souls, God prepares them. The receptive souls are those people that God, in my opinion, God refers to as, he causes them to draw nigh unto the most great ocean. So he takes them to the shore, right? They get to it, but they stay there. You know, they're the seekers. You didn't choose to, God prepares them. But then if he chooses, then he confers the honor of recognizing the most ancient name, which is the name of God, and it's the name of all the prophets. This is the eternal faith of God in the past and in the future. So that the first part of the sentence is about the seekers that God basically prepares. And then with your own teaching, you can carry that a step further and you lead them. And if it is meant to be, and God decides that the way you're going to be talking is going to touch them profoundly, they're going to recognize the faith of God. So in that sentence, basically we're talking about receptive souls that get close to the ocean and that God makes them accept the faith. And some people accept, as you know, immediately, and some just take a long time to accept. Now, so um, so we start off with that. Now, when we started teaching people about the contents of the faith, we always have different options. We can talk about the social teachings. If you think this person um, needs to be hearing about all these principles that are going to guide mankind and create a new civilization, and this is the cause of God, so you want to talk about that. Some people don't care about that too much. They don't have that kind of vision. They want to be touched by the prayers. And so basically you have to show prayers, because if they are touched by the prayers, it is the prayers that are going to touch them and not the social principles. Then other people may want to know about the laws of God, because we say we have a book of laws that is going to direct the civilization, the world order. So if we talk about the laws, you have a choice. You can talk about many laws. You can talk about hukukullah, you can talk about marriage, you can talk about funerals. I would just quote you, if I can find it. I'll quote you one of the laws that one doesn't really mention, because we figured why mention these things to people, but you never know the reaction of somebody. So let me read this law. It's number 76 in the Kitab Yaqdas. It kind of tickles your mind. I want you to listen to that. It said, God hath enjoined upon you to observe the utmost cleanliness, to the extent of washing what is soiled with dust, let alone with hardened dirt and similar defilement. This is God speaking. That's what we believe in. Fear him and be of those that are pure. Should the garb of anyone be visibly solid, his prayers shall not ascend to God, and the celestial concourse will turn away from him. Now, that's what it says. There's no symbols here. This is what he says. Make use of rose water and of pure perfume. This indeed is that which God hath loved from the beginning that hath no beginning, in order that there may be diffused from you what your Lord, the incomparable, the all-wise, desireth. Now, I haven't seen many people in teaching that quote this passage. So what I'm saying is, why not? Why don't we? Why don't I use it? Why do we have to always choose the same kinds of things? Because you never know what the person you're talking to, unless you know him well, is really interested in. People that may be close to that ocean, maybe God has guided them to accept him if you mention this sentence, as opposed to the earth is but one country. So I'm just throwing this out just for you to think that the verses of God have effect that you can never ahead of time measure or calculate. You have no idea. The point is that we always are faced with the possibility of talking or not talking. And because I tend to be speaking, at least for a while on these Sundays, I have to put into practice what I'm trying to preach. So whenever you're in front of somebody, you always have to decide, should I open my mouth or not open my mouth? Now, lately, I had not taught for 3 days. On the 4th day, I decided to talk to a driver. It was a taxi cab driver that is loyal to my son. And the reason why I decided to speak to him is because he seemed like a nice guy, and his name was Abraham. So I said, Abraham, are you Muslim? I mean, I was joking with him, there's no. So what are you? Protestant? No, I'm Catholic. So I said, well, listen, I can't talk to you right now because we are driving, so I'll talk to you soon. So I waited, I guess, a couple of days to hook up with Abraham. I figured I can't miss this one. if I was in London or Paris or Los Angeles or Irvine or Moscow, I probably wouldn't talk to a driver like that, because drivers will look at me and says, "What is your business with my name Abraham and telling me that where I pray?" But in Africa, we who are fortunate to have landed here somehow feel this thing that you can open your mouth anytime, and people will always love you for speaking. They're not going to jump and accept what you're saying, but they listen. That's something that is a quality that you don't find in many places up in the north. So the last time I saw him, I said, "Abraham, I remember I told you about the faith. Did you? Who are you? What do you do?" He said, "Oh, I'm a Catholic." So I said, "Like, are you practicing Catholic?" He said, "Well, my parents are, but I used to go to church every Sunday when I was growing up in Catholic schools. But at one point, I don't know at what age, he said, I stopped really going." I said, "What? Why?" He says, "I kind of felt some heaviness." I said, "Well, what does it mean, heaviness?" I didn't explore the heaviness. I just let it go. But I started telling him about the faith, and he listened. And I promised him a book, and then I let him be. I haven't seen him since. So that was the first day. I felt very courageous. I said, "My God, at least I'm opening my mouth to somebody, because if I don't open my mouth, I cannot show my face here on Sunday and telling them about teaching or quoting the perfume quotation from Kitab Akdas or whatever." So the next day, the mechanic came by. His name is Bruno, nice guy. So I was about to pay him um, for the repairs he did for me. I didn't give him a lot of money because we didn't have enough these days. So I figured I'd make it up by talking to him about the faith. And I just said, "Do you go to church?" He said, "Yeah, of course." So he was kind of didn't know where I was going. And then I said, "How about you?" He said, "Oh yeah, I went to church." And then he made a comment that's very strange that I cannot really quote exactly. But the church that he went to, the preacher preached at somebody's funeral that apparently had done something in his life that he didn't think it was very good. Something. I almost acted like I heard or I didn't hear it. I just sort of figured something he didn't like about what the preacher did. So then I started talking about the faith and about the promise of Christ. And I went that road, the road of the return of Christ. I mean, it's Christ. It's not Baha'u'llah now, but it was Christ before. And so he sort of took it in very nicely. So those two things, you can say you planted a seed. The advantage is that when you're going to see them again, because they're in the same city, then that seed you can water. If it was a cab that I was never going to see, which happens all the time, I talk to like cabs all the time, they're always excited, but you never see them again because they're busy, they're working, and you can't call everybody all the time. So the point is, and this is what my point here, is that whenever you're in front of somebody, you have to make a decision. Do I say something or I don't? And if you teach a lot, if you don't open your mouth, you're going to be feeling guilty because you say, "My God, why didn't I say something?" Because nobody's watching you and nobody's keeping track. Are you going to open your mouth or not? But I have to admit that it is easier in this part of the world to open your mouth as often as you can, because I don't see you at bus stops in Scotland or in Brussels or I don't know, Switzerland, stopping in front of somebody and making any mention of anything related to the faith, unless you have a big, gigantic sign that is shining, blinking lights, and the guy is like, can't believe what you're doing. And he says, "Why God, what is this?" "Oh, this is my faith. We are Baha'is, we have holy places all over the world. Here are my temples." "Oh, wonderful." So anyway, so I close that parenthesis about teaching. And then I come back to the early believers. The early believers, and we're talking about Lady Blomfield, Ethel Rosenberg, and the early Baha'is in British Islands. But before I talk about what they did in terms of service and their involvement in helping humanity and and during the war and the Red Cross and all that, all the things that we're supposed to be doing these days, us in terms of the coronavirus. I'm going to just take the little walk down Adrianople, and then I come back to these ladies, and then I come back to Abdul Baha in Akka. And I want to be touching on service and about what women have done in England and what women have done in the Holy Land, quickly. But before I talk about the ladies and service, I'm going to come back to Adrianople and to mention the early months of the arrival of Baha'u'llah in Adrianople, just before the writings of Baha'u'llah to the kings and before the break with Mirza Yahya. That was an extremely difficult time for Baha'u'llah. But let me just come back so we can go through this promenade down the arrival of Baha'u'llah in Adrianople. You know, we all know Adrianople it's in Europe, and this is the only prophet of God who set foot in Europe is Baha'u'llah. The only one. And when he arrived, the city has a long history. You can read it up in Balyuzi, and I'm sure you know the story, but I'm going to talk about it because there's two incidents of what I consider kind of my kind of Baha'i humor. It has to do with Baha'u'llah, what he said. But the first thing I want to stress is that when they came in, it was so cold. It was awful. And if you read the pages 218 and 219, and you read what Baha'u'llah and all his companions went through in the coming from Constantinople on horseback or in, I don't know what transportation, people froze to death crossing. And then when they arrived, they had no clothing to protect themselves from the harsh winter. They were in houses that were meant for the summer. They're extremely cold houses. Can you imagine spending an hour in a cold house? Just turn off your heaters in your houses and put the temperature to like a fridge and spend 5 hours there. And you'll see what Baha'u'llah went through. We're not talking about Siah Shal, and we're talking about all the tortures and all that. Just talking about the cold. The cold was horrendous. They said that one night, the jug of water froze. That's like being in a freezer. Anyway, so in this storytelling, it's Hassan Balyuzi quotes two writers that were taking notes. One of them was Aqar Rida. So I just wanted to stress this business of Adrianople, where it was and how cold it was and how awful it was. But anyway, Baha'u'llah was looking for housing. So there's two incidents that are very fantastic, and that to me is what the best Baha'i humor that I have come across. So if you permit me, let me just read this to you. I'm sure some of you know it, so maybe I'm wasting your time. It says, Aqar Rida recounts the story of Ali Big, the centurion who had accompanied Baha'u'llah and his party from Constantinople. When he came to take his leave, he begged Baha'u'llah for promotion. The guy is not bad, he's smart. So he had been a centurion for too long and was no longer young. To gain the rank of Big Bashi and be posted to Adrianople was his dearest wish. Baha'u'llah assured him that all would be well with him, and indeed, before long, he turned up at Adrianople, a Big Bashi. So not only he went back to Constantinople, he came back and he was named Big Bashi. So the guy was extremely happy. But he wouldn't sit still. So he sought Baha'u'llah's presence to express his gratitude, telling everyone that it was by bounty of Baha'u'llah that he had obtained his remarkable promotion. After a while, however, he began to long for another step up the ladder. Once again, he begged Baha'u'llah that his desideratum be granted to him, and once again, he was assured that he would be given the higher rank. So the guy insists, and Baha'u'llah said, okay, fine, we'll give it to you. And so one day, he appeared with the badge of Mir Alai. He himself could not believe his luck in having attained such a military rank and never ceased to declare openly that he owed it all to Baha'u'llah. And he consorted with his followers whenever and wherever he could. But as he had come such a long way, would it be unreasonable to desire and attain the rank of a pasha? How long do you want to live? Baha'u'llah asked him. And not long after he was dead, Mir Alai Ali Beg. You know, when Baha'u'llah tells him, okay, you guy, I give you 2 promotions, and he's older man, says, how long do you want to live? You know, to me, that's the summum of the humor of Baha'u'llah. Now, that was the first one. The other one is quite touching. You know, they're looking for houses, and Baha'u'llah didn't know what to do, so he calls up this guy. His name is Mirza Mahmud Kashani, and he's hoping that somebody will help Baha'u'llah find better housing because they spent months in that lousy place. So he says, you're a tall man and nearer to God. Pray that he may give us a better home. So, you know, who would think of that? So anyway, so the guy actually prayed, and then Baha'u'llah says later on, he tells everybody, he says, Baha'u'llah, then when they finally got the house, he says, Baha'u'llah observed, God answers the prayer of Akhai Mirza Mahmud. He prayed that God may give us a house. His prayer was answered and his house was found. You know, house was found because Baha'u'llah says he's taller and he's closer to God. So, you know, the prophet says things, and he must have said tons of these things. So, now, we'll leave Baha'u'llah in Adrianople before the storm hits. You know, we don't want to deal with that part. We're just trying to deal with the cold and with Baha'u'llah's humor and all these people that are suffering around him, but they are exiles, you know, they're going somewhere. They didn't know where they were going. They ended up going to Akka and all that. So we come back now to the early believers, and my star here is Lady Blomfield. Lady Blomfield became a Baha'i. It's a long story. You can read it up on Baha'i, and you can Google it and find out her story. Her husband passed on like before 1900, and he was knighted, so she became Lady Blomfield. She was very, very receptive, very spiritual lady with her daughter Mary. So when she was in Paris, by pure chance, she said she was at a reception in Paris at the house of Madame Lucien Monod, and they heard a lady by the name of Bertha Herbert, an amazing lady. She came running to them, beaming with joy, telling them, I'm so happy. You want to know why I'm happy? And she sat between daughter, and she explained to them she had seen, she heard of the faith and the prophet, and you know, all that exciting things. And so the woman listened, and you know, like she was just beaming. And so Lady Blomfield and her daughter just were astounded by this woman that came so excitedly to talk to them. So she says these amazing words when she says what she said about Abdul Baha. She says, these amazing words struck a chord to which my inner consciousness instantly responded. And I felt convinced that the portentous announcement they conveyed was indeed the truth. Great awe and intense exaltation possessed me with an overpowering force as I listened. So basically, she really became a believer. And she was taught by Ethel Rosenberg, who was the first Baha'i lady in the British Isles. And she was taught by Hippolyte Dreyfus, the first French Baha'i. And then when she went to London, she met Mrs. Thornburg Cropper, who was the first Baha'i in the British Isles, but she's American. So all these three were like the very beginning of the faith in the British Isles. And they all connected with Abdul Baha because they went to see him. And so Lady Blomfield, as you know, wrote The Chosen Highway. And the most exciting thing about her book is what they call the spoken chronicles. She interviewed Bahia Khanum, and Tuba Khanum, daughter of Abdul Baha. Now, I want to come back now, before I come back to, to the interview with Tuba Khanum and what and how Baha'u'llah, how Abdul Baha lived and served in Akka, and all he did for everybody, including what the services he rendered to some women that were in very difficult situations. I'm going to come back to what she says about the daughter of Baha'u'llah, Bahia Khanum. So when she went to pilgrimage twice, spent a lot of time in the Holy Land. You know, she was very lucky. During the time of Abdul Baha and later during the time of Shawki Effendi. So when she spoke with the daughter Bahia Khanum, this is what she says. You forgive me if you know the story, then I guess I'm going to bore you to death, but listen what she says. Because we don't hear this about Bahia Khanum. You know, we hear about her when she's much older. She says, during the period of the sojourn in Baghdad, Bahia Khanum, the greatest holy leaf, was her mother's loving helper. I mean, basically, Bahia Khanum was devoted to Baha'u'llah, to her mother, and to Abdul Baha. She was, I think, 2 years older than Abdul Baha. Now, she said, I never had time for anything. Didn't have for studies. You know, she lived in the household, and she was always serving both Baha'u'llah and her mother, and later on Abdul Baha. So she said that her life was spent in prayer to God and service to her loved ones. From the time when, as a small child, she was cowered in the dark house alone with a tiny pierce branch, a baby of 2 in her little arms, listening in terror to the yells of the infuriated, cruel mob, not knowing if they were murdering her father or whether they had seized her mother and the little 8-year-old Abbas. So, you know, she grew up, and this is the concluding words of that interview with Lady Bloomfield. As she grew up, she implored her father to allow her to remain unmarried, that she might the better devote herself to her 3 dearly loved ones. She begged Baha'u'llah to remain single. And so it was. An old man, a friend of Baha'u'llah, told Lady Bloomfield, that he once said to him, Baha'u'llah told him, I know no man worthy to marry such purity as my daughter. Baha'u'llah said, I know no man worthy to marry such purity as my daughter. So I said, Khanum must have been very lovely. And so the old man says, I have been told so naturally. I never saw her. So then we go on, and Lady Bloomfield, who has done amazing interviews, comes back to talking to the daughter, one of the daughters of Abdul Baha, Tuba Khanum. Now, Tuba Khanum, in a chapter where she talks about Akka, trying to explain what Abdul Baha did. Abdul Baha was just serving people right and left, day in and day out. I mean, it's like anybody with any problem would come to Abdul Baha, and he wouldn't just listen, he would deal with it. So we're trying to set examples of serving. We're talking about teaching here. I'm trying to explain that teaching is also serving. That teaching is not just opening your mouth and talking. You can also serve. Abdul Baha was not always running around proclaiming the message of Baha'u'llah. Sometimes he was just serving from morning till evening. I guess I don't know if he came home. But I'm going to give you 2 incidents of what Abdul Baha did, the kinds of things he would do, just 2. There is like maybe 100 or 1,000. This one has to do with another lady, because I'm trying to dwell on the ladies, because the ladies have an important role in this faith. So there was a poor crippled woman named Naum. Okay, I don't know who she was. She used to come every week for alms. One day, a man came running. Oh, master, that poor Naum has measles. She's lying by the hot room of the hammam. Everybody's keeping away from her. What can be done about her? So these are the kinds of things that people bring to Abdul Baha. Imagine they come to you and they tell you that kind of story. What do you do? So the master immediately engaged the woman to care for her, took a room, put comfortable bedding, his own, into it, called the doctor, sent food and everything she needed. He went to see that she had every attention. And when she died, in peace and comfort, he it was who arranged her simple funeral, paying all the charges. That's another instance out of many. Now, if you think this is quite amazing. Now, look at this now. Then there's this guy, an old man who was, I don't know where he was from, probably from Turkey. He said, "Oh, Abbas Effendi, I have a secret. I want your help. One daughter, my daughter, one daughter only is left to me of all my family. I don't know where she is. Her husband is not kind to her. You and you only can I trust." So he trusts her by giving him, he shows him a bag of gold, 70,000 piastres, about 700 pounds. He says, "This sum I wish my dear daughter to have. After deducting 500 piastres from my funeral, I do not wish the money to get into the hands of that cruel man, her husband." So Abdul Baha is given that major issue of someone who is about to die, who wants to give the money to his daughter, and says to Abdul Baha, "You take care of that, please do that for me." So Abdul Baha could have said this, "I can't do this. I mean, how can I do this?" He says, "No, fine." So the master agreed to endeavor to find this lady and to have the bag of gold given into her hands. So the next day, the Pasha died at peace. He died, finished. He was happy that finally Abdul Baha was going to take care of it. So the master chose a certain of the Pasha's few belongings for the daughter and gave the rest to the old servant. He then arranged an honorable funeral befitting the station of the Pasha, defraying all expenses himself, so that the bag of gold might not be lessened. So he wouldn't touch the bag of gold to pay for it. Although the man says, "Use my money to pay for it." So the state allowance to the exiled Pasha was owing. So this, the governor paid after much insistence, and it was added to the daughter's gold. So then he arranges for the gold to be taken to Sana'a. Sana'a is in Yemen. It's a difficult task in those days. So he chose a dervish by the name of Muhammad Ali, a devoted disciple who used to look at all these difficult tasks, and he gave him the responsibility of going to find the lady. So I'm going to make it short. So he goes and takes this, he entrusts the money with this gold, and he has to manage that and give the money to gold and to have to go all the way and pay for the trip. And the man eventually finds the woman. I don't know how he found her in Yemen. And this is a project, okay? This is Abdul Baha. I mean, he has nothing else to do but this, but he did all those things at the same time. So he set forth on his quest, being furnished with minute instructions for seeking the lady, and with sufficient money for his long, laborious journey. So in 5 months, he returns. He had reached Sana'a, and though encompassed with difficulties and risk, had achieved the task, escaping the cruelty and avarice of the husband. He had succeeded in delivering the bag of gold and the little treasures of her father into the beloved daughter's own hands. All was accomplished, and his faithful messenger returned, bringing a receipt from the lady, signed and witnessed by the Wali of Sana'a. You got certification that the money was given to the daughter. So these kind of things, these kind of examples of services that Abdul Baha rendered, there is like tons of them. You can go and you can do an inventory of all the things Abdul Baha did to help people. So once again, in this coronavirus, we says we have to be able to help humanity. You know, can we get inspired by those kinds of things and do things like Lady Blomfield himself was involved in working with the soldiers that were hurt and were wounded in the war, and for years in Geneva and in Paris, worked in hospitals and helped. So it seems to me that as we all speak of teaching and living the life, they, there are things that we, you know, we need to do. We can do. I don't think you need to ask permission from anyone that you're going to do a certain service to your community, your neighborhood, your street, the hospitals. So it seems to me that, I guess, as Baha'is, we're going to have to find a way of combining the actual proclaiming and the planting the seeds and teaching and guiding and involvement in the communities for the betterment of you know of our environment, our friends, our neighbors, our community. And if you look at Lady Blomfield, what she did during all those years in Paris, in London, in Geneva, or Abdul Baha, what he did during his lifetime, especially in, I mean, he was called the father of the poor. You know, that's all he did. Um, you know, so again, I just wanted to leave you with those things. Now, as I was doing all that, um, I, uh, I found a conference, a talk by Mr. Naqshbandi in 1988. I don't have the English translation with me now. I have another one, but in 1988, he was talking about the three phases of teaching, because here we are talking about individual teaching. As you know, individual teaching is you talk one-on-one or you do firesides. But then the faith itself doesn't grow like that. You know, that's what we can do as individuals. But you know, the faith grows because we are working on a process of entry by troops. And you're talking about the plans of the House of Justice and the Institute and all that we do as a community with institutions that will create eventually the conditions for entry by, what do you call it, mass teaching and mass declarations. But all those things are connected to the awful things that will happen in the world that will bring the masses to the faith. They're not going to come just like that. They're going to come because there will be amazing things that will happen to this world that will bring the world to its knees and will make people investigate the faith in terms of hundreds of thousands to finally accept it. But Shoki, Mr. Naqshbandi was saying that even though there are three phases and the faith grows like that, the individual teaching will never stop. Like this fireside business, Abdul Baha says, Mr. Naqshbandi says, will be for us forever. There will always be people that will want to know about the faith and will accept the faith, will be taught. In 10 years, in 100 years, maybe even in 1,000 years. So we should not think that because there's other processes going on for people to hear and accept the faith, that the one-on-one, that contact is going to stop. That will always continue, whether we do it because we meet somebody walking down in the park or somebody you bring to your home regularly. This personal contact, that will never stop. So by us talking here, we are not trying to say that we should not participate in all kinds of teaching activities to bring the masses in the faith. We are saying that we should always find ways for in our own life to bring more flowers to our bouquet. You know, you have to make sure that from day to day, from week to week, you're daring enough to open your mouth, because one never knows the reaction of somebody in front of you. And it is the hardest thing to really decide to speak. And I grant you that when I'm sitting in France, when I'm walking the streets of or Vichy or Roscoff or Paris or wherever I go, or even Pasadena, I I never find the courage to actually speak unless you sort of you become friends with somebody and then you mention the faith and then they react positive, because sometimes you mention the faith, but then it falls on deaf ears, like as if you were talking about a Martian that landed. So obviously you're hoping for somebody to say, "Oh wow, what is that? And tell me more." So if you're expecting people to tell you, "Oh, tell me more," then you could be in for a surprise. So the question is, I'm not asking you should all leave your homes and come to the boondocks and to the jungle, but in the jungle, that's where you have people listening. For now, they're listening. Maybe they're not going to listen eventually. So, and as people become more material, this is what Mr. Yazdi was telling me once, that in Africa, so long as people are not becoming too material, they listen to you. But if they become too material because they have a lot of money or they've made it, they'll stop listening to you. So there's something about, having and not having. When you have too much, you feel like you don't need God, you don't need anybody. What more do you want? You have everything you need. So again, Mr. Nashjavani's talk that I'll probably share with you sometime, all I remember is firesides are going to be here for us forever. Individual teaching will always be with us forever. So I think we touched on different topics. We've touched on prayer. We've touched on the meaning of that first prayer that defines who a seeker is and who can accept the faith once you get to the shore of that ocean. We've talked about prayers. If you have dirty clothing, God doesn't listen to you, so you can forget about it. That's a statement, and that's Kitab Akdas, and you can share it with people. They get tickled by it. How come God refuses to? Because that's what God decides. That's what He wants. You're going to tell Him that He should change His mind, change the laws. And then we talked about amazing ladies that you should always read upon, and there's Lady Bloomfield is one. The chronicles of all the daughters of Abdul Baha and Bahia Khanum are beyond belief. They're so amazing. Then we talked about Bahala and Adrianople. Just read the part before you get to Mizayahia because it's going to depress you very much. So try to get there before his brother poisons him and becomes such a pest. And then Abdul Baha in Akka, if you read about it, he must have done a million things. I don't know where he found the time to do it, the energy, the follow-up. He's diligent. And, again, so what do we learn from that? There must be something there that we have to pick up to see how we can. And again, everybody keep tabs on what you're doing. You have to write even journals. I knew I forgot something. And that I'm so unprepared, but I have my books around. So, Lady Bloomfield wrote a lot, and her daughter discovered a lot of the writings when she went through her papers. Besides, of course, the major book, which is a testament to the amazing saintly life she led. And this is Mr. Balyuzi will tell you that, and David Hoffman will tell you that. But this is the last words that I'm going to read to you. They come from a book called Some Early Baha'is of the West. And it says what happened when her daughter went through her papers. She says, while going through the papers, Mary, her daughter, was much surprised to find how much her mother had written. Had no idea. This is besides, of course, the chosen highway. With no apparent thought of publication, she had described in diaries and in engagement books some of her dreams and visions. Mary felt that the prayer which she had discovered written faintly in pencil on an old piece of paper well expressed the theme of her beloved mother's beautiful and saintly life. And this is a prayer. Now, we never hear Baha'is writing prayers. I guess, you guys, if she can write a prayer, all of you can write prayers. I guess, I don't know, but that's what she says. I'm just reading to you what I'm reading here. She says, "Oh God, my beloved, all my affairs are in thy hands, Be thou the mover of my actions, the lodestar of my soul, the voice that crieth in my inmost being, the object of my heart's adoration. I praise thee that thou hast enabled me to turn my face unto thee, that thou hast set my soul ablaze with remembrance of thee. This is the woman that was knighted, her husband was knighted, who accepted the faith the minute she heard of it. She is Irish, born in Ireland, probably the first Irish Baha'is, at least the first Irish Baha'i woman, although she lived in London, Paris, and Geneva. Never hear of her. I guess if the Irish friends there, they can confirm, but I mean, she was born in Ireland. And she was connected to the very early, the first woman Baha'i, American Baha'i living in England, and the first British Baha'i, Ethel Rosenberg. These are the giants, and they tend all to be women. I'm sorry, I mean, I just quoted women. I quoted Bahia Khanum, I quoted the daughter of Abdul Baha. So the giants in this faith, in the early part of this faith, were women. I mean, Martha Root and company, and Lua Getzinger. And Lua Getzinger is the one that taught Phoebe Hearst. And Phoebe Hearst was a friend of the lady that taught Ethel Rosenberg the faith. I mean, it's all, that's what the 19th century, end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century was. So, friends, this concludes my extremely long and tedious presentation. But I hope there's enough thinking here, enough ideas that all of us can find, things to say, to build on, and to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Oh, you're a French speaker here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was beautiful. Lovely talk. Lovely talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you mind, Mr. Zein, to share what is your conception of teaching when you're walking down the street, let's say?
Yes, Alex. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to, if you might share, what is your conception of teaching when you're walking down the street, no matter which country or place? I mean, of course, probably it's, many people talk about, oh, people aren't receptive, but that's not important, is it? It's really what our intention is, and that change, and the outcome changes according to location, tradition, country, etc. So, but what attitude what is your conception when you want to teach? What about teaching? What is it?
Well, I mean, listen, Alex, I'm a Baha'i like you. I don't know any more than you do. So what I can say is this, culturally, there's a big difference, of course, walking down a street in Kinshasa, in Nairobi, or in Norway, in Finland, or wherever you're walking, the way people sort of are used to or not used to being approached. Now, the way people approach people in Europe, right in the street, besides maybe Jehovah's Witnesses or these preachers or people that preach, are the people that are working for Amnesty International or for Save the Children. Those kind of people, they're always dressed in orange or gray or yellow, and they all have pamphlets, they have very big smiles, and they stop you in the street, and they have a minute. And so most people say, because they're asking for money or you're not sure you want to deal with them. So they are sent by organizations. Now the faith is not sending people in that fashion, So we are talking about individual initiative. So if you're an individual initiative, you're an individual, and you're walking down the street, in some parts of the world, you'll never find the courage to stop somebody, to talk to him as you're walking in the street, because he was going to find you very bizarre. And the one thing we're going to avoid is making like a bad beginning contact, because if you mention the faith to somebody who may be in a hurry, and you mention, have you heard of Baha'u'llah? I used to say in the past in street teaching, in mass teaching areas, in the south of the US or in France, or, those are different contexts, because it'd be teams teaching. So because you don't know who's receptive ever, you'll never ever know that. It's not going to be written in their face, so you can't tell. You're going to have to find occasions where you are in a place where you can eventually strike some sort of conversation. Now, we're talking about unknowns, because if somebody that you know, then it's like a fireside type of thing. That's what firesides are about. Is about people that you know, you invite to your house because you know them, or if you're married, your wife knows them, you know, and so you come to the house, have dinner, and then they come and see for Abdul Baha. Oh, who Abdul Baha? Who's is it? Your grandfather? No, it's Abdul Baha. You know, that's fireside. But if you want to teach individuals, you know, unless you are sitting in some sort of cafe and you have a book open and somebody just glances at it, or you know, and it's kind of an art, but that art of teaching is never going to work unless you are intent on teaching. So you have to already be wanting to do it, because if you're not in a teaching mode, you're not going to be able to seize opportunities. I'm saying it's if you just are not thinking about teaching, you're never going to find anything to say to anybody. But if you're trying to find, my God, you know, like I haven't taught anybody, what can I do? How do I strike a conversation? You know, you're going to have to do some testing yourself and tell us next week. You're going to have to think of ways of how do you actually connect with a human being that is around you, that through giving him something, through a conversation, through, I don't know, I mean, there has to be some reason to connect with the person. You know, and I don't know how you connect with somebody in Northern Europe, you know. How do you do that? You know, if somebody you have seen more than once and he knows you, like you go to a store or to go to a coffee house and you sit there, you drink coffee or something, and you strike up a conversation and you talk about yourself, you know, maybe at one point after seeing the person like 5-6 times, you may have like a Baha'i book on the table, or you have a badge or something, and you may say, what is this? You might be able to, but that doesn't mean the person is going to want to continue talking to you about it. He may just, oh yeah, you're Baha'i. Oh, good. Like that's the end of it. Then you won't have any reason to raise the subject again, because the matter is closed. So he's never going to ask you, so what is your belief? Because he doesn't really care. So, and since we know you're going to find 99 closed doors, you're going to have to expect 99 basically deaf ears and rejections. The point is there's only one that you don't know, and that's the one that you want. Like Lady Blomfield, how many women were there in Europe? Why on earth was Lady Blomfield the one that became Baha'i in a second? Why? Why her? I mean, we're not talking about the 1 million women that were sitting in Paris at the time, and she was not from Paris. Woman is Irish. She was traveling with her daughter Mary and went to this reception in Le Salon of Madame Monod, and was sitting there, and by chance this woman comes running around beaming and saying, I've heard there's a prophet here, and she jumps in. Okay, so the point is that's a success story, but this is one person. But we're not talking about the 1 million that were not in that living room, that never heard of the faith and never became Baha'is. So, because when you read stories of people that became Baha'is, they all have amazing stories. But then there's about 100 million more that you don't hear about because they have no stories, because these guys were never interested. So since we are supposed to be teaching, and we know that there's going to be 99% that they're going to say no, you're stuck. Because you either say to yourself, my God, this is useless, you know, why do I spend time looking? Because they're going to be not interested, and it's going to be so discouraging. You're going to have to find ways, and that's courage, and that's, you know, because you have to teach around yourself, you know, unless you plan to teach through internet and through Zooms and stuff like that. But if you want to do physical, you have to expect a lot of people that are going to turn a deaf ear. But my experience, and I'm not a good teacher, but my experience, even in Europe, and talking to people, is that what you want is people to hear the faith and kind of say, wow, this is good. I love, I love your faith. Listen, put that in your bouquet, because you're not expected to have people already jump and say, wow, let me sign the card. I want to become like a board member, a counselor, I want to become a master. You're not going to get that all the time. You may not get ever. But then you can say that the person said, wow, I'm a friend of the faith. I have people that I know that know the faith, that respect the faith, that may even like prayers, but that will never become Baha'is for reasons that I don't know. And sometimes they will become Baha'is and you never know. So the important thing is that you have to seize chances.
Just mention one thing, if it's possible.
Right.
In
Good. Who's speaking, Bileta?
It was a mistake, I think.
Yeah. So Alex, we're waiting for you to tell us. You have to instruct us. You have to come and tell us things that we need to learn from you. Because God is watching you, watching us, we hope. But he deals with you. He doesn't deal with us. We are like you. You are supposed to find ways. And you never know if it's going to be a 50-year-old girl, a 95-year-old woman, somebody's in a hospital bed, somebody that is on the street corner, somebody who's begging. Who knows? Who knows? It's you. And I guess people tell you, well, you have to pray. So you pray to God, and then God will open doors. I'm sure you're going to be doing amazing things in Norway.